What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about my first solo trip. I made a lot of mistakes on this first one and learned some really important lessons when it comes to solo travel. So if you're looking to go on your first trip or just travel in general, keep watching. So before we get into the trip itself, let me give you guys a little bit of background. So my first ever solo trip was only my second time ever being on a plane and my first time ever being outside the country. To give a visual of an idea of what my experience looked like before I went on this trip, I made this graph right here. Yeah, I had none, zero, nada, not an ounce of travel experience before I decided to hop on a plane, fly 7 time zones over to a country where I couldn't read the language, couldn't communicate with anybody. And add on to that, we were still in the midst of travel bans during the pandemic. When I look back on it, there's really no reason I should have bought this plane ticket at all, but I can tell you that I'm glad I did. And I say all this to encourage anybody who wants to go on their first solo trip but might be scared to do it. Just do it, man. Like, you could not be less prepared than I was before I went on my first one, and I made it there and back, no problem. Not no problem, but we'll get into that. So for my first ever solo trip outside the country, going on a plane with myself, all that, I decided to go to Athens, Greece. Now you might be wondering, why did I pick Greece? And you're probably thinking, oh, the food, the culture, the scenery, all that. And that's all great, but to be honest with you, the answer is it was the cheapest flight that I found sitting in class one day that lined up with our dates for fall break, which to this day is still by far the best travel deal I've ever gotten on a flight. It was Cleveland to Athens with only one stopover over in Chicago for $310 or something like that. And if you're curious to how I find travel deals like that and I'm able to travel as a full-time student, then check out my Instagram, link it down below. And with all that being said, let's get into the trip itself. Like I just said, my first flight was to Athens from Cleveland, but I had a stopover in Chicago, which actually made it even longer, which is still to this day the longest flight that I've been on. It was over 12 hours to go from Chicago to Athens. And a question I get asked a lot is, how did I spend my time? What did I do with all my time over there? And that's gonna bring me to lesson number 1 that I learned, is not giving yourself enough time. So like I said, I had never been on a plane by myself before, never been out of the country before, any of that. So I didn't know what jet lag was, how I was gonna feel after getting off a 12-hour flight, how I was gonna have to adjust to the new time zone, anything like that. So I flew in on October 14th and I flew out on the 17th. That's right, I flew over 12 hours there and 12 hours back. So 24 hours total in the plane just to stay 72 hours in a new country. I even have, I'll show you the passport, I'll show you the stamps to prove it. You guys can see right there, my first ever passport stamps, October 14th, 2021, October 17th, 2021. So yeah, don't do what I did. Stay for longer than 3 days, especially if you're flying 5,000 miles away. The mistakes and the lessons learned do not stop there. They just get started. Since I instantly land and realize I've never taken public transportation before. I don't even know how it works. I can't navigate a metro line, I can't navigate a bus route. So there is a 0% chance I'm gonna be able to navigate all of this as soon as I touch down in a brand new country and get to this Airbnb. But after downloading Uber and having some troubles meeting with my driver, I finally get in the car and I'm on my way to the Airbnb, which is right in the middle of Athens. Checking in is pretty uneventful besides the normal just wandering around the streets, looking for the right address. Besides the absolute torrential downpour that was beginning to flood the main floor of the building I was staying in, check-in was fine. And now that's probably it, right? First day, sucked getting from the airport, bad weather, but that could, what else could go wrong? Turns out that the whole world does not use the same outlets. I did not know this at the time. So with phone, laptop, portable charger all dying, it is a mad dash the rest of this first night to try to find an electronics store that is A, open, and B, sells a power outlet adapter. I'm sparingly using my Google Maps, running all over the city, trying to find a place that's open because at this point, it's 7, 8 p.m., everything's closing. But I find a metro station that was actually really close to where my Airbnb was. And I go down in there, the shop is closed, but I can see through the window that they have these little outlet adapters, and I'll just have to come back tomorrow morning. Hopefully I can find it without my map. And that would be lesson number 2 that I learned on my first solo trip, is do your research. Know where you're going, know anything that's gonna be different, like outlet adapters, what the weather is gonna be like, have your transportation plans planned out from the airport. I didn't have any of those things. I had to figure it all out once I got there. But thankfully, I woke up, went down there, bought 2 EU outlet power adapters that I actually still have to this day, right here. I keep these with me and I bring them with me every time I go to Europe still, just as a reminder to not be an idiot. And now that that was all squared away, everything was charged up, weather was starting to be nicer out. I was starting to really enjoy my time in Greece. So I only had one tour planned for the whole 3 days that I was going to be there, and it wasn't until my last full day. So the second day that I was there was just spent really wandering around, seeing what there was. It's really a surreal, amazing experience when you're in a new country, thousands of miles away from anywhere you've ever been before, and you're just completely by yourself. You're almost like uncomfortably free. You can do literally anything. Nobody's there, no one knows you, nobody cares. But that's one of my favorite parts of it. So luckily I happened to pick an Airbnb that was only like a 20-minute walk away from the Acropolis in Greece, which if you don't know what the Acropolis is, it's like an old citadel full of ancient temples on this high, rocky kind of cliff area right in the middle of the city, which is some awesome views, great history over there. So I just kind of lucked out and was able to walk there. But before I left, I had no idea it even existed. Do your research, know what you're there to see. It's a good idea to know one of the most historically significant sites in the entire country is 15 minutes away. After seeing the Acropolis in the morning, the rest of the day I just kind of spent walking around. I was gonna go over to a market that my Uber driver was telling me about on the way to my Airbnb on the first day, but that brings me to my lesson number 3 that I learned. And lesson number 3 is be aware of tourist traps and scammers because they are everywhere. So obviously some places are worse than others. Egypt and Paris, I know they're very well known for having aggressive and a lot of tourist traps and scammers, stuff like that. There wasn't that many, it wasn't bad at all when I was in Greece, but I'd never experienced it. Long story short, an older Greek man comes up to me speaking Greek, asking me for the time. Go into one of his friends' bars or cousins' bars, something like that. I sit down, and next thing I know, I'm paying 100 euros for 3 drinks. But that's a story for another day. Just learn from me, look out for tourist traps and scammers. So my second and last full day in Greece, I went on the only tour that I had booked, which was to go see the Temple of Poseidon. But this tour I got wasn't the best. It was all right. It was just a local guy came picked us up, but I did end up getting some of my best pictures, or my favorite pictures that I've ever taken. And this brings me to my last day in Greece. So my last day was not a full day, so I didn't really have time to go do anything. I started walking back towards the airport just to save a few dollars on an Uber and not get on a bus and figure it out for myself. I will get lost. So I just started walking back to the airport. When on my way there, I come across this big stadium. It's only a few euros to get in. So I figured, why not? I have some time to kill until my plane. It looks old. All the seats are made completely out of stone. And there's this long tunnel that you walk up and go through. And then at the end of this tunnel was just a room full of all these Olympic torches and Olympic memorabilia and stuff like that. And of course, I didn't know this at the time, but I'm in the Olympic Stadium. This stadium actually hosted the very first modern Olympic Games in 1896. So I ended this trip with one of my favorite parts of the entire thing, completely by accident. So yeah, that was my first travel experience, and it's nothing short of a miracle that I made it back. But that was almost 3 years ago. I've been to 11 countries now. I'm on my way to my 12th year soon, going to Mexico in a few weeks. So leave a comment down below if you learned any of these lessons the hard way like I did, or what some of your biggest travel mistakes were on your first few trips. So if you guys like this, like I said, I will be in Mexico for a few weeks here soon. And then after I graduate in May, I'll be in Mexico, Guatemala, Colombia for about a month. If any of that sounds like something you might like, subscribe. Check out my Instagram down below where I post a lot more stuff over there.